Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
In this episode of the tie-in, we wanted to do things a little differently and turn the mic on each other.
Yeah, we're always asking others about themselves and learning from them. And we thought we would share more about ourselves too, to give you a window into who we are as your hosts of the tie-in.
Yeah, so we'll be asking each other questions and inquiring about the past, present, and future, and just to get a little more scope and share with you our thoughts, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mark, why don't you go first? All right, so
All right.
I'll just kick off with one of our general questions. Like, tell us about yourself. How did you get into clean tech?
Wow. Okay. Well, I started in the energy industry in 2001. So I actually did a geology degree when I was in the late 90s, and I really loved the idea of field trips, and I loved hiking, and I loved nature. I didn't know if I wanted to be a geologist, but I knew that it was more interesting than physics or chemistry, even though geology does take into account a lot of physics, chemistry, and math. But it was more of a um, yeah, sort of like a useful science as the way I would think about it, and ended up actually working in the oil business to start my career. But that's where I also fell in love with energy and the energy transition. That's something that in early 2000s I was working as a well site geologist in the oil business and started reading all these books about the end of oil, about hydrogen economy, about solar and renewables. And I was just really inspired and really passionate that I had a window into the future of the industry. And yeah, so that's what took me down that path. And then I started to contact all of the great energy mines that I could in Canada. And that's mines,
I
M
know, I was
I
going to
N
ask
D
you.
S. Um, and and I asked them, I said, look, I want to study with you. I want to study energy economics. I want to study the future of the energy transition. And they all said the same thing. You have to leave Canada to study this. And so I said, okay, perfect. So yeah, that took me on my journey here in 2006. I went back to school and I did a master's degree in energy economics, finance, and policy in Scotland and Paris, and loved every minute of it. And really, when you start to study energy, the first thing is you learn that there's still a billion people without access to basic electricity, and that GDP and economic well-being is completely tied to access to cheap electricity. And and so that really took me on that path. We don't really care about oil, for example, right? We want the benefits of the energy.
Right.
And so that took me on that path. And then in 2008, the economy tanked and I was left going back to the oil business for another 5 years while I reformatted my future and the next moves. And I knew that I was wanted to do entrepreneurship and really wanted to focus on the battery segment, as I saw that the battery industry was really starting to take off, and Tesla had just come out with their line of cars. And so that's really what took me on this path. And in 2013, I did my MBA and focused my project on doing small portable solar generators in South Africa and Namibia. And that was
Wow.
really, yeah, that was kind of crazy. The business failed wonderfully, as I always like to joke. Um, Try to do too many things at once, but that's really set the setting for for where I took the idea of off-grid portable solar generators and industrial solar generators into what is now portable electric. And you've probably heard us mention it or in passing through our guests, portable electric or the Volt Stack. But that company I founded in late 2015, and that's still going today and still one of the market leaders. But that really, it was Zolaire and that off-grid energy that really set the stage for understanding the market and where things were going to go for sort of industrial solar generators. Bit of a long-winded answer there, but
Yeah, well, no, that's really interesting. So, with your background and all, what ended up driving you to the entertainment industry? I mean, that's where you and I met. So how did you enter in that space?
was a natural progression for me. On the other side, I've always been throwing events and parties and activations, and you can't throw an event without access to electricity. So sound, lights, point of sale, any type of other device, the DJ gear, that all requires electricity. And so I very had a clear link to that. I also was part of a Burning Man community that was doing all types of different off-grid events. And obviously Burning Man is an off-grid event. And everywhere you go, there is a gas or diesel generator. And that was I just knew that we could do better on this planet. And if we're going to power our parties and sound and lights, we can do that with clean energy and batteries and solar. Unlike making cement or construction industries that are reliant on large amounts of power and diesel generators, we can power events. And so I started powering events and festivals with the business in 2016. And then Vancouver being I don't know what it is now, but at the time it was a $4 billion a year film industry, the production folks started to see this equipment showing up at various street parties and events, and the early adopters. And then we're inquiring about it. And then we sponsored the Crazy Eights Film Festival.
Right.
And that's where we met a lot of the movers and shakers in the industry. And that's the rest is history.
Yeah, well, the rest is a lot of engagement with the industry, I think, is really what it is, because you and I met probably right around that time. And I remember just being so impressed with you because you were out there talking to people, setting up the equipment, taking it down, engaging with everyone. I mean, you are a wonderful
Mhm.
talker and engager and all, and I've always been really impressed by that. But you guys did a lot of work early on engaging. What did you
Yeah.
learn?
I always used to joke that 50% of my day was actually doing education, market creation, market education. Um, at the beginning, the very first response, well, we realized that there were early adopters, typically a bit of a younger generation who automatically understood this, but there was an old guard that also was resistant to change. There's also the equipment rental houses who had all their own gear, who already owned it and were getting a return on that gear. So there was definitely a complexity to understanding human behavior and how they wanted to run their businesses. So yeah, there's a lot of engagement. I always used to joke. People used to say, "Well, how long does it last?" Well, the answer is, well, it depends. What do you want to power and for how long? And so a lot of the early days we went and we borrowed, sky panels, and we borrowed new lights. We borrowed, a 4K light. We borrowed all types of different lights. We even borrowed an 18K light when we were making the 30K. And that helped us to come up with calculations, right? That I think we were one of the first to come up with the sheet that had all the various lighting equipment and how long we could run them. And so that really allowed us to understand, how long, whatever, a 200-watt panel would last for. Or if we had five of those, like, great, that's 1,000 watts. How long would that last? So a lot of that early understanding of how long the power system would last. And then you could put solar on there and you can extend it. And we also started to do like fully off-grid events. So at the peak of learning, we did almost a 1,500 person festival where we powered the main stage with our 13K at the time and a hybrid with a diesel generator, and the rest of the entire event grounds were done with solar and batteries. I actually
Wow.
shot a documentary. I had a film person follow me around, but we lost the footage. That was a little piece of history that was lost. But
Yeah.
really what it became to is understanding that there's a communicating of how long the system is going to last, the benefits of the system. Then there's an operational component, right? How it's used, how the user interfaces with it, how their level of comfort with the equipment. Um, and then it has to be up to them to start to figure out other use cases, right? We talked about that with Todd Lapp, for example, right? There's always this aha moment in the users, even David Sinfield, right, from Green Voltage, like they all saw and understood that this was a new tool in their toolbox, and they could do these things. And then as they were doing those things, they started to realize that there was a whole plethora of other applications that they could do. The fact that David and Green Voltage, um, have the last, but they said they did 49 shoot days and 40 of those were without a diesel generator, right? So that's really we enabled the innovators on the ground to really take this technology and find the right applications for this gear, and also saving time and money and showcasing that this is the way it is. And now you look at the industry, and I mean, batteries are a mainstay, a part of the industry now.
Yeah, but back in the early days, um, you know, when you were engaging a lot with the folks on the ground and showcasing the equipment at festivals and live events, what was it like going out and pitching this new equipment to, you know, other companies, studios, or equipment suppliers? What did that part look like? I mean, those are the folks who would what, buy or rent the equipment. What did that piece look like for you?
Well, when we first started doing it, we didn't sell our equipment, so we only did rentals to get traction, understand the limitations of the equipment, what needed to be changed. It was really interesting though, because we we were hilariously viewed as competitors, which is still to this day I find comical. Uh, a little tiny company with 20 prototype power systems would compete against large equipment rental houses. But it became apparent that there was definitely a lot of territorial, um, sort of not conflict, but territorial pressures between the various rental houses and the shows and the alliances that they have and allegiances that they have. So that was something that we had to navigate, and to not be viewed as a threat to them, but more as a partner. And then ultimately we started selling the equipment to those same rental houses, and that equipment is still in play today, so many years later. um, I wish some of them would renew it faster. But yeah, the original gear is still there, it's still working, it's still out in the field, and although a little banged up. But yeah, but what was interesting is that it's when we really got down to the US, that it started to go, because obviously there's a lot bigger market. California itself and the film industry and production industry down there is huge, versus in Canada. There tends to be always sort of two main rental houses, and they're kind of at each other's throats most of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was like kind of early, but it was a bit of a push pull. In We had to step on enough toes to get seen, and then when that happened, that's when we started to sell the equipment to the rental houses.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, I find this, it's so interesting what you said about this sort of this feeling of, this um being territorial and whatnot. I have seen this in manifest in different ways in various parts of the industry. And I'm just curious from your perspective, do you think that that kind of approach held back progress? Did it delay progress? I mean, I'm just curious, like, I mean, you're on it from the product side, the equipment side. I see it from more of a service oriented side, I suppose. But I'm just curious from your perspective if you saw like, you
Mhm.
know, delay in what we could do in the market.
Absolutely. But let's not forget that there was an also, um, I should have mentioned earlier, but one of the things that made this possible was the move to LED lights, and efficient screens and LED screens. And so I think that there was still a resistance, to the equipment rental houses to replace their old gear, the incandescent bulbs and sort of that type of tungsten lights and so on, HMI, with LED lights. It meant a wholesale revamp of their inventory. So I do think that there is an inherent resistance and lag because, well, we own all this equipment, we're making money from this equipment, and to invest in all this new equipment, we don't even know if people want to use it, etc. So there's always this thing where you've got to get like 20 phone calls a week for an equipment rental house to actually go and buy that piece of equipment. So I think the resistance was more around, um, you know, equipment rental can be a cash cow. And especially if you've got paid off equipment that you own that's still around, and 10 years later, you're still making money from it. So I think that was one of the main points there. But I do think that, um, that we could be much further ahead today, and especially in Vancouver and in Canada, where we had a bit of a hotbed of innovation here. Portable electric spurred on other manufacturers here in the region to create, competing and non-competing power systems. So Vancouver already became this sort of little center of innovation. So in theory, we probably should be able to make entire productions here in Vancouver without a diesel generator. We have the city of Vancouver, right, has the power kiosks that they spent, a long time implementing, that Jeff Tioli and his team, City of Vancouver. So in some of the busier shooting locations, we have clean power already, which is from hydropower. So I think all the stage is set here, uh, to do it, but it's still been a slow go and still been quite resistant. So I don't know. I think so. I think it's kind of a little bit of both. But I do think, and I've said it before, but if there's one industry that can completely decarbonize, that can completely be net zero or net positive in some form or another, it is film and entertainment. We can do this, and we have the technology today to do this. And is it perfect? No, it's not. Like, the technology is going to evolve. It's like if you bought a laptop in 1986, right? I mean, it was this thick and this big and weighed a ton, and the battery lasted for an hour. It's the same, right? We're in this early stages of adoption, but we have the tech, the people are here, they're willing. So it's just there's some push pull, and it's going to happen. But yeah, the industry though has no excuse. We need
Yeah.
we need to move this thing forward.
Yeah. Well, so I'm curious. You mean you mentioned Vancouver, starting in Vancouver. Vancouver is a hotbed of innovation, and that that means continually trying to re-up, reinvent yourself, innovate, continue to innovate to kind of to get to that next level. I'm curious, you've worked in Canada and you've worked in the States. what does that mindset look like in each location? Is there another area that's like really hungry for this?
Well, we know that obviously the US are tend to be much early adopters, way earlier adopters to new technologies. Um, we're seeing California, obviously, any type of energy technology you could imagine, grid power and grid integration, all that stuff's happening in California as we speak. It's also happening on the East Coast, New York, Massachusetts, in that area, and also in places like Texas in the South. Although they're a little bit slower on some things, but they're really quick on other things. So yeah, but again, I think it comes down to mindset. Like I really think that so this dragging of our feet is really mindset. It has to start with the executives at the top. It has, and then the sustainability executives need to have the power to make decisions and make changes happen. And then the production managers and everybody underneath literally have to be asking for these products and have to be asking to be able to make productions with limited footprint. So, but I do think there are equipment houses that are early adopters that have the equipment. That the challenge that I see, and I see it in other industries, like even the adoption of the bigger power systems. A lot of these equipment rental houses don't really care or don't really want to put their full effort behind it. Um, Now we are seeing large rental houses like Sunbelt really start to make those investments. The challenge here is that it's all about the user, right? So you can introduce a piece of technology to someone, but if the user just goes, nope, that's not going to work, and just throws it in the corner, and then it runs out of batteries and it doesn't work the next time that they use it, well, there's nothing you can do about it. So I think with the technology, you have to train qualified users, electricians and gaffers and power system operators and so on, DPs, to know how to work that equipment, to know where it can be used, where it can't be used, to know the limitations of it. Because when I see clean energy systems not working in both film and other industries, it's traditionally because of the user and user uh, either user error or user unwillingness to make it work. And that theme comes up over and over again. I know even Neil from Overdrive, like he mentions that a lot too. A lot of the companies that are successful today in powering all types of productions from, well, we'll be talking to the Coldplay guys who did Coldplay at Show Power. They'll probably have a similar story. The ones that are successful are the ones doing their own deployment of the technology. So sometimes they're developing their own, sometimes they're buying it, but they themselves have a high touch model that they
Mhm.
control the entire energy field of this product. They control the software. They understand exactly what's happening. They didn't just put a piece of equipment out there and hope that some operator who doesn't know how to use it will be successful with it. So I think that's a really
Yeah.
critical point to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And also by high touch, you also mean um the care and willingness to engage and train people as well, right? Because, in some situations like film and TV, some of these positions are union positions, and there are certain requirements that go along with it in terms of who operates certain equipment, that sort of thing, because people have certain training and that's their job. And introducing something new then requires one to upskill, get trained on it. And so, how has that worked for you, in terms of engaging in that way, that kind of educational way?
Well, I mean, I think that's more of a question for the work that you've been doing, and also like organizations like Real Green and other organizations that have been really tasked with trying to move the industry forward. But training is critical. There was a moment where we were pre-COVID, um, we're really thinking about, trying to set up a course, right, called the Path of Power, or some sort of course that we would have done in a training. Now, I've spoken about that numerous times, done some presentations and so on. It seems like now there are courses starting to pop up and training. Um, I know that there's GHG and CO2 abatement training as well to understand, but a lot of it comes down to really having industry professionals showing other industry professionals how this equipment works, what the limitations are, getting it out there and testing it. Like Mike Harwood, for example, right, from White's, he's got his course. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, but it really has to come down to that willingness to learn new technologies and to understand how it works. I mean, if you don't want to use a computer, there's probably people out there who still don't know how to use a computer because they just don't want to learn. But
Yeah.
we're talking about energy computers here. People have to
Yeah.
learn how to use them.
Yeah. I mean, the world is constantly evolving, right? Um, so this ability to, or this willingness to learn is critical, I think, in staying with or ahead of the curve, right? I mean, it just is. So over these last, I don't know, 10 or so years that you've been in this space, what has stood out? What surprised you about doing this work?
Oh wow. Can't wait to ask you that question.
I'm
Uh,
gonna prep for it
no,
now.
it's yeah, I think it's always it feels like everything's always in two speeds, right? There's always this um early adopters and consumer and market sentiment, which is like, yes, we want this, we want this, we want this. And then there's the second speed, which is like, whoa, slow it down. This costs money. This takes time. We can't just change things. So it's always this sort of dichotomy between these two things. We saw it with EVs, right? There was this huge run up about EVs. The consumers that were polled said yes, yes, yes. Everybody was going yes, yes, yes. And then people aren't buying them as much, right? There's reasons why, of course, but it's you always have this sort of everybody's excited, people invest, 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 and then all of a sudden it's not quite there. So I think that's the understanding, is just where does it shift gears and how do we bridge that gap? I think that's the biggest thing that I'm thinking about right now in terms of how do we overcome that? And we're seeing it today. We're seeing it with companies like Moxion that just had to close their doors. It's not because there isn't a market there, um, but clearly there's other factors that play here in building new technologies and deploying them and having companies use them. And just because you're the first mover doesn't always mean that you're going to be the one at the end, with that, right? And I think that's a thing to need to understand as well. When you're creating new markets, when you're introducing new technologies, being the first mover is actually the hardest position to be in, because everybody's got a target on your back, um, right? And we saw that here in Vancouver, right? People are more willing to try to, take somebody else down versus try to collaborate and work with them to try to move things forward in a faster, more collaborative way. And I love the term, always comes co-opetition, right? It's this idea that we can compete in a cooperative marketplace. Like, why not? Like, we can do this, right? We have this ability to do this. Humans have an incredible capacity to do this type of, cooperative, competitive, market creation. And so, and I think film has to be able to do this. Um, because if it can't, I mean, there's going to be other challenges. This is not the first time that new technologies have come in. It's not the first time that there's been disruption. Um, and so I think that's going to be something that we've got to address on a daily basis. Every day, we've got to look ourselves in the mirror and be like, okay, how are we advancing things, or what are we doing? Why are we in the way?
Right. Really reflecting on that because it's not, this is one piece of equipment in the toolbox, as you mentioned earlier. There will be others. There will be new innovations out there and all sorts of things, sound equipment, lighting equipment, power
Virtual
equipment,
production.
virtual production, like all sorts of things. I mean, you just go walk the floor at the NAB show, and for me, it's mind blowing all of the interesting, innovative technologies out there that I never even heard of,
Hmm.
that all contribute to this massive ecosystem for the entertainment industry. And so if it's not this, it will be something else, right? So, um,
Yeah, but we're also going to see, there's eventually a generation of filmmakers and uh, production folks that are going to retire or move on to other projects, and then there's going to be a new generation that comes up. And I think this comes down to one of the things that we talk a lot about, at least personally, maybe not on the air, but um, around film schools, right? Engagement.
yeah,
We talked to, I mean, Simran. It's like I don't understand why film schools aren't just jumping into this thing and leading the charge. Like
yeah,
that's still um and that's something that we can explore. I mean, we will be exploring that as
yeah,
we continue
yeah.
talking about this, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely, we've talked about it as you said, but definitely have thoughts on that. And I agree. I think that's just a huge opportunity space, and I think approach to that there there's another way, right? Another approach that could be taken. Um, and and I think it's a critical area. Um, to look into because this is where you're really grooming, the people who
Yeah,
work in the entertainment industry. So,
absolutely. But
yeah.
also it means that there has to be new business models,
Hmm.
right, to support introduction of new equipment. Who can be different people who own it, different sub rental agreements with different rental shops. Can't just expect film schools to go and buy millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment,
No.
right? So I think that's something that's worth exploring. But there's no question that film schools need to get on this, and students are demanding it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this takes me to uh, looking to the future. What is exciting you now? What are your thoughts on the future of sustainability? I mean, maybe film schools factor into that, but what do you think?
So we talked about this the other day. If we're still talking about sustainability in this current context, in 10 years, we've failed. So I think really when I look at what sustainability means to me, it really means an efficiency built into the system, um, where we're not actively trying to undo the work that we've done. We see that a lot in certain industries, but really what we're saying is we're building upon the previous 5 years of knowledge and technology, and we're continuing to move forward. Um, and I see sustainability as an opportunity for humanity around the globe to get together and solve some of the world's biggest problems. If
Hmm.
if that's what it takes to get humanity working together, then I'm all in on understanding, climate change and COP, the conferences, the climate conferences. It seems like a lot of spinning wheels, but at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is just figure out how to speak and listen and hear each other around the world, because climate change and sustainability, um, impact every single person, and in fact, impact the global South and countries that are even more at risk, island nations, even more so, right?
Hmm.
So I think it really is a global issue, and I think the beautiful thing about film is it's a global industry, and we
Yeah.
tell stories, and we can tell just unique, beautiful stories that can involve all types of things, so climate change, and messaging, and the technology behind the scenes. So that's why I'm passionate about sustainability and entertainment. And we're seeing it now with major rock shows, right?
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
Coldplay, right?
I know.
Let's go.
I
They're
know.
doing it.
They're doing it. And it's so cool to see how this is playing out in different corners of entertainment, you know, and how they're talking about it, which I find fascinating. Um, how some people are kind of unapologetic and they are out there and they are talking about it, and it is just the coolest thing. And others really hold back. And for fear of uh, what? I mean, some people who have been real innovators out there hold back in
Mhm.
talking about this.
Yep. Yep. It's
And
almost like a secret. It's secret, you know?
yeah, and so it is really interesting. And I say, I'll pull from Rachel Maddow, watch this space because it's moving and shaking out there, and all corners of the industry are starting to wake up and use battery power solutions and other cool tech and rejig processes and all sorts of things that they're excited about. So
Totally.
yeah, thank you,
Awesome.
Mark.
Thank you. All
It's
right. Now,
fun to dive in and
I
learn more
know, and that's
about
just
you.
scratching the surface.
I know. I know.
All right, let's turn it on you.
Oh, great. Great.
All right. So
Sure.
so Zena Harris, one of the leaders in sustainable production and sustainability in general. I call you the guru of sustainability in film and entertainment. But you've been at this, I think, longer than almost anybody that I'm aware of. Yeah, maybe tell us a little bit about um, how you started in this industry, right? And what drew you to the entertainment industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll harken back to college. I mean, first of all, I am originally from a small town in South Texas. Um, I I don't know how I was interested in sustainability. It's definitely not a word that came up. I didn't even actually learn the term until way later, um, kind of, in undergrad. Um, but but as a kid, I was the one running through the house, turning off the lights. Like nobody told me to do that. I was just like thinking, like, why are we wasting this? What we're paying for this, or
Mhm.
but my family didn't really talk about it. And a little entrepreneurial as a kid, crushing cans so that I could go take them to the recycling center so that I could get some money for them. Things like that would just come up. And and I don't know, they were just I'm not sure. I've thought about this a lot. I'm not sure where it all came from. Um, but just interested in how things work. Um, and and how we could do things better. I was just always fascinated by that.
Mhm.
And that took me into a psychology program in undergrad. And a specific field of psychology is called industrial and organizational psychology. And essentially, that is the psychology of work. Why people do what they do in the workplace, what influences them, all sorts of kind of corporate factors around that, behavioral factors around that. And I was very fascinated by that and that field. I still, to this day, listen to podcasts about it all the time, constantly trying to learn more. And I landed in human resources at a large
Mhm.
engineering company, global engineering company. I was in human resources, started out in their oil and gas division, actually, in Houston, Texas.
Wow. Did
Yeah.
not know that.
Yes, I worked in Houston for a year and a half. And then I transferred to the corporate office in Pasadena, California. And I worked in their construction division. And at the time, their construction division was acquiring other small construction companies. And me being in human resources, I was tasked with integrating those other companies into the parent company. And so I was on the mergers and acquisitions team from a human resources perspective. And I would go out to small job sites, to these other organizations, to their sort of their headquarters, and integrate folks, train people on corporate systems of the parent company. And in doing that, I realized, wait a second, as I'm trying to explain, the policies and whatnot of the parent company, there are things that are inefficient about this, inefficient about these policies and how they interact with each other. And I started very, paying attention to that and thinking there's got to be a better way when we construct these corporate policies and systems and whatnot. And that stuck with me as well, thinking about how do we make this better? And and I started asking myself that, where do I go to learn this?
Mhm.
How do I, I was kind of thinking about doing a master's degree and what is this called? And it turns out it's called corporate sustainability. And I found a program at Harvard that may have been one of the first, I'm not sure, that was focused on corporate sustainability. And so I entered that master's program and was just one of the best experiences ever. I really loved it. I loved learning. I loved being pushed to think about how things could be and seeing examples of really innovative companies out there, um, integrating sustainability in various ways, management systems, all the whole thing. Just I loved it. But interestingly, as I was getting close to submitting my proposal for my thesis, I I ran across a series of studies in my the course of my master's work that it was the MIT Sloan School and the Boston Consulting Group had collaborated on a series of studies where they interviewed folks in C-suite and different companies across different sectors. And they did it over a series of a few years and, reported out the results, how is sustainability being integrated into various sectors. And when I looked at the trend across, the several of these studies, the entertainment sector was at the bottom of the list. It was at the bottom of the list. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait a second. I mean, I, at the time, loved watching movies and engaging, going to concerts and like these are the these are the things that really, influenced me. Grew up watching movies. Everybody does,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
I'm thinking, wait a second, this means something. How do I impact this industry then? How do I use what I've learned um, to do something here? Let's figure this out. So that was the essence of my master's thesis. Was looking specifically at film and TV because I lived in LA for a little, or Pasadena for a little while, and got to go to a few movie premieres and had friends who worked in the industry. So I'd go to set and sit and watch people and watch, they follow the cables. Where are they going? Like, what is this?
Mhm.
So I was just curious. That was back in the day where you could bring guests to set and whatnot. Anyway, so I focused on film and TV and started looking into it and meeting folks who worked in the industry. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of public information. There's
Mhm.
very little. And I wondered why. Maybe that's why the research from, that I'd seen in those studies didn't reveal much, didn't put entertainment higher
Yeah.
than other industries. So that's how I got into it, actually. Being curious about how corporate processes work, and then reading a report in grad school that really tuned me into entertainment and the way it influences um, culture. And I mean, there are details in between, like
Was
I
there one report though? Like, was there one piece of information that you found that was like, okay, this is the sort of cornerstone of this new research?
So these particular studies were being, it was done over the course of like I think 3 or 4 years. And so I looked at that body of work and just to see, has entertainment improved over the course of these studies? And it hadn't.
Mhm.
Why not? I'm like I said, I'm originally from Texas. And this idea, this concept never really came up for me growing up. And if I, go back and think, how do I influence the people like in my family or my neighbors and whatnot, my community? How would I do that? Because just saying, hey guys, let's recycle wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough. I wasn't making any traction on that. Um, and so everybody watches TV. So that was also, like if entertainment's at the bottom of the list, it is a mechanism for reaching people, I've got to figure out how to do something with that. And so that's why I picked it. That's why I studied it. Um, because I knew there had to be a better way. And I quickly learned, like, yes, there are practices that one does behind the scenes, um, in the, operations of making a film or TV show. And then there's, of course, the content on screen. So in those early days, I was thinking, I'm going to reach people through their TV, which is the content on screen. But in order to be credible, even on that side of it, you have to be walking the talk behind the
Mhm.
scenes, right? So I started my work focusing on the practices behind the scenes because I thought that was, you know, that was the first step. Like we've got to get that, figured out, and lower the production footprint there, before I could really spend any other time, on the content. And then, of course, since then, many other people have jumped in on the content side, which has been fantastic. So, yeah. And then after I graduated with my master's, my family moved to Vancouver, well, Squamish, British Columbia, which is just north of Vancouver. And I started looking around, like, what's going on here? I had just did all this research on the industry, like what's the film industry look like in Vancouver? Turns out it's the third largest film hub in North America. There's a
Yeah.
lot going on.
Yeah.
So I was out there knocking on doors, meeting people,
What
calling
year
up.
is this?
This is 2012, 2013. Yeah, meeting people. I think I got my first job on set in 2014. Yeah,
Doing
2013, 2014.
and what was sustainability like back in 2013, 2014?
Sustainability was, I would say, really focused on waste and recycling. Um, I mean, it's the stuff you can see. It's the stuff that, people get really emotionally attached to. Nobody likes seeing lots of waste on a film set. Nobody likes it.
Mhm.
Um, Yet it happens a lot. And then it happened a lot. I mean, we're getting better. We've definitely improved as an industry over time, but that's what it was back then. And as I was new to Vancouver and meeting lots of people and trying to understand the local ecosystem of service providers and, what the city was doing and what the industry was doing, it seemed like such a prime place to really focus on this because there there were a lot of service providers out there doing this work. Keep It Green Recycling, I think, Kelsey Evans, like big shout out to her. She kind of started this movement in Vancouver. I mean, she was the first one out there, recognized the need, and started recycling. And everybody pointed me to her. You need to meet Kelsey. You need to meet Kelsey. So she and I have been friends since then. I mean, we really, it's been a journey, and an evolution. But the city of Vancouver at the time had this really new, innovative greenest city 2020
Mhm.
plan and that sort of things. They were really thinking about it too. And the film industry locally had kind of made an attempt at sustainability with uh with a resource they had called Real Green. I think folks in the industry there uh, put that together, like a web page of resources in 2006, I believe, if I remember correctly. And so people were thinking about it. And I got in there and just started trying to meet as many people as possible and pull the industry together. I think that's kind of a thread through my work is how do we bring people together? How do we collaborate, as you mentioned, what does that look like? And how do we really do it and not just talk about it, you
Is that when
know?
you started Green Spark Group?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Um, because when I got my first job on production and I was looking around, I realized this could scale,
Mhm.
right? I was one person working on one production, and we've got like, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 happening in the city at the same time. Like this is, we have to be and there's more to it than just going and working on production. There's educating people, there's working with industry organizations, there's bringing a whole, programmatic approach to this so that a whole local ecosystem and industry can thrive, right?
Mhm.
And and so that was what I started doing. And I mean, it's led to helping Real Green get off the ground, get started and scale. That has been a fantastic endeavor. Early on, I recognize that while other industries have conferences that they go to, people in other industries go to conferences to learn about very, nuanced things. Um, we didn't have anything like that in the film and TV industry for sustainability. So I created the Sustainable Production Forum
Mhm.
in collaboration with the Vancouver International Film Festival to bring people together to talk about sustainability. And man, that first one, it was like a day long, and I don't know. I thought it was fantastic. My personal feeling was like we caught lightning in a bottle here. Like
Yeah.
everybody was engaged. And that's when I think you got up there and busted some myths about power. Like I mean, it really ignited a conversation. And it's 9 years in. The sustainable production is still going. It's now its
Mhm.
own nonprofit. I mean, talk about evolution. Um, and and it's just had I think quite a ripple effect on the industry to be able to come together and talk about this and learn and go through various workshops and whatnot. People are hungry for it, hungry for knowledge and hungry for change in various ways, however they're coming to sustainability. And so that's just been a fantastic vehicle, I think,
Right.
for collaboration.
Absolutely. And still going.
Yeah.
Still going and still figuring it out. What surprised you the most then, right? Over the years doing this work?
Well, it's interesting. What surprised me the most is that while data is really important, it's not often the thing that gets people excited. Like it's absolutely necessary. And I used to, in the early days, try and, we collected data on greenhouse gas emissions and whatnot, and I would put that forth, like, hey, take a look at this. And and I realized, I kept doing that, and I realized like it's not the data per se, it's the story you tell around the data that gets people
Hmm.
excited. It's when they hear their peers say, talk about what they're doing and how cool it is and how, somebody liked a certain thing or did this really innovative thing. People get excited and then you bring in the data. And so that's really surprised me because that wasn't the initial approach I took. But I started experimenting with how to communicate with people and what seemed to get people excited, and it was really about storytelling and peer-to-peer, hearing from peers, peer-to-peer stories, essentially. And you get that through things like SPF and, bringing people together at, community meetings and union events and things like that, right? Where people can gather.
And
Um,
identifying champions, right? I mean, I think that's one thing that
yeah,
that you've been really good at.
yeah, yeah, because, you know, there are people in the industry that, certain positions people look up to, right? And And when you find the champions that can talk to their peers, it makes such a huge difference. It makes a huge difference because, chances are, those, folks worked for these people in on other shows, in the past or whatever. And they're seeing it and like, my boss is talking to me about sustainability. Oh my gosh, these kinds of things, right? So that's why early on, like I recognized, producers have such great power and opportunity to really influence how productions are made, the culture of production. And so I started getting to know
Yeah.
producers and trying to understand how they think about things. What are they thinking about? What are they worried about, right?
Hmm.
And in so doing, learning like, okay, well, how do we solve for that? How do we, you know, figure out how to infuse sustainability into to the things they're thinking about and how they can influence in that production. And I've learned a lot about that and human behavior
Hmm.
along the way. So yeah, it's important to find champions out there to message the work.
Yeah. And then pushing social and sustainable behaviors, nudging them along the way, right? And giving them the tools um, to do that work. I think that was a big thing in general, right? I mean, I think people were just kind of floundering about, and um, I think once you introduce the tools to be able to assess that and measure and power things and so
Yeah,
on, I mean, it becomes a lot easier for the boots on the ground to get engaged, not just the
right,
production manager.
right.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Providing a bit of a framework, talking to
Hmm.
people about certain things. Absolutely. And then what I find is so important is that a production is a collection of people
Hmm.
all working to get that story onto the screen. And they have to work together in various ways in order to make it all happen. And if people are not taken care of in that process, then it's really difficult. It's challenging to get the job done well. It just is. And one of the things that I like to focus on is giving people the agency to do their work, to ask questions, to be curious. And and people are curious about sustainability. They want to do better. They just need to be given the chance to do it. And if folks in leadership pay attention to that and harness it, it's golden. I mean, it is. I've seen it happen in productions
Hmm.
where it has just been like the culture on set has just been so rich and curious and engaging on sustainability, and everybody's into it. And I have seen the exact
Yeah.
opposite where it has been
Self-select.
squelched and
Yeah.
people have been, it's like their thumb, producers put their thumb on people and they aren't
Hmm.
willing to hear what people have to say. And it is challenging. And I bet we've all been in workplaces like that, and it's not a fun place to be. So I'm more on the side of people and giving them agency and really trying to foster that and giving the tools and information to make great decisions. That's kind of where I come from.
That's great. Um, last question here. So what excites you now, and what are your thoughts on the future of sustainability?
Well, kind of thinking about the people, what excites me now is it sounds simple, but training the workforce. I've been working really hard on this with a team of folks to bring forth the standardized training for the entertainment workforce. And it's exciting because while there are a lot of different trainings out there and they're all good in their own regard, we have yet to have an industry standard for training. How do you know if one training is better than another? How does an employer know which training to steer a person toward? There is no standard.
Mhm.
And there are standards that exist in other industries. We build to these certain standards. We create management systems to certain standards. There are other standards out there. So this is an opportunity to level up. In that regard and create a standard for training. It's we're partnering with the U.S. Green Building Council of California on this, and the standard that we're creating is called the Sustainable Production for Entertainment Certification. So people can get certified and have letters after their name, and they can, be proud of that, and they can re-up their certification and all of that. So that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about empowering the people. I know that by doing that, they will get curious about that equipment, as you say, and start using it, learning about it, using it, for example. So I'm really focused on that and focused on people and focused on integrating sustainability into the entire ecosystem.
We got sports as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's so funny because, it was in 2018 that we went down to the USGA at Pebble Beach with Fox Sports and showed them that we could actually reduce, CO2 and gas emissions and toxic particulate, and we could power camera positions and different towers around with batteries and solar. And that was 2018.
I know.
I mean, so
I know.
so we, I mean,
It's all
it's happening.
possible. It's
Yeah.
all possible. That's the thing. It's all possible. I'm for creativity. I'm for opportunity. I'm for people. Um, and when you put those things together, I mean, my gosh,
Yeah. This is
you
it. This
know,
is the industry.
this is
It has all
it.
of
That's
those.
what we do, right? And the ability to problem solve. We hear people talking about that a lot, problem solving, huge component of this work because there's just so many interesting things that come up and people have to problem solve all the time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I do believe that this is the industry that will take the world forward, and I'm excited to be part of it and hear from like cool people out there doing amazing work in this space across the board, everywhere in the ecosystem, up and down the value chain,
Yeah.
um, because it takes us all to do it. And the minute we start competing on sustainability and getting territorial, it really starts to hold us back.
Yep. Yep. And we know the film industry is very good at that stuff.
So I'm for breaking down those barriers
Yeah.
and moving forward as quickly as we can, because my gosh, the whole world needs to engage on this.
Mhm.
And who better to help them engage than entertainment, right?
Yeah. I love it.
So
All right.
that's it.
Thanks, Zena. That was fun.
That was fun. Thanks for doing that.
I feel like we could just keep going forever.
Oh, I know. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah. Awesome.
So
All right. Well,
cool.
thanks for listening, everybody. And that was a little bit about Zena and I, and I'm sure there'll be lots more of those to come.
All right. See you later.
Hey everyone, wanted to give a shout out to the Sustainable Production Forum in Vancouver, BC on October 8th and virtually on October 23rd.
We'll do a live recording in Vancouver, so come and join us there. Go to the sustainableproductionforum.com to get your tickets. Hello, entertainment industry. Something I've been working on over the past year with partners U.S. Green Building Council California and Aerith Environmental is the development of the Sustainable Production for Entertainment Certification, or SPEC, as we like to call it.
It's the first certification for the entertainment workforce, and it's now live for folks to sign up.
Yeah, go to the U.S. Green Building Council California website at usgbc-ca.org to learn more about it and to register for an upcoming class. This is a great way to up your sustainability game and gain a professional certification. So this is for you. See you in class. designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Our producer is Colin Miller.